My name is Claire Morrison, and I was 33 years old when my sister decided, right in the middle of a Sunday brunch, that my son didn't belong on our family vacation. She didn't whisper it. She didn't hesitate. She said it the way people say things when they're confident no one will challenge them. "We're supposed to relax," she said, swirling her mimosa like she was making a reasonable point. "And honestly, your kid just isn't a good fit for this kind of trip." The table didn't go quiet. The cafe around us stayed loud and alive, coffee machines hissing, forks clinking, laughter spilling from nearby tables. My mother reached for the bread basket like she hadn't heard anything unusual. My father leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the TV mounted above the bar, pretending the sports highlights were suddenly fascinating. Only one person reacted. My son, Noah. He froze. Noah was 7 then, small for his age, his sneakers not quite touching the floor as he sat beside me. He'd been humming softly to himself, tracing circles on the paper placemat with a blue crayon. When my sister spoke, his hand stopped mid-motion. The crayon slipped from his fingers and rolled onto the floor. He didn't look up. He didn't ask what she meant. He just went very still. That was how I knew he understood. We had been talking about the trip for weeks. A summer vacation near the coast, rented houses, shared dinners, long walks by the water. I'd shown Noah pictures of the beach on my phone. I'd promised him shells and sunsets and pancakes every morning. He had counted the days on a calendar taped to our fridge, crossing each one off carefully like it mattered. This trip wasn't just a getaway. It was something he had been holding on to. My sister, Melissa, leaned back in her chair, satisfied. She glanced around the table, waiting for someone, anyone, to back her up. When no one objected, her lips curled into a smile that told me she'd gotten exactly what she wanted. "Melissa," I said slowly, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. "What do you mean by that?" She shrugged. "You know, he's sensitive. The schedule, the noise, the changes. We're all pitching in for this trip. It's not fair if everyone has to adjust." I looked at my parents. My mother took a sip of her coffee. My father cleared his throat and said nothing. That silence was louder than Melissa's words. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger, not yet, but recognition. This wasn't new. It was just finally out in the open. The quiet tolerance. The unspoken agreement that my child was an inconvenience everyone politely worked around. Noah bent down to pick up his crayon. His hands shook just a little. I placed my palm over his, grounding him the way I always did when the world got too sharp. He leaned into me without looking up. "I think we should go," I said. Melissa blinked. "What?" "We just ordered." "I know," I replied. "But we're done here." I didn't wait for permission. I stood, pulled a few bills from my wallet, and guided Noah gently from his chair. As we walked out, I heard Melissa scoff behind us. "You're being dramatic, Claire." I didn't turn around. In the car, Noah sat quietly, staring out the window as the city passed by. I wanted to ask him if he was okay. I wanted to explain. But I knew better. Sometimes the kindest thing is to wait until a child is ready to speak. He broke the silence first. "Mom," he said softly. "Yes, baby. Did I do something wrong?" That question landed harder than anything my sister had said. I pulled the car over without thinking. I turned toward him, cupping his face in my hands, so he had no choice but to look at me. "No," I said firmly. "You didn't do anything wrong. Not today. Not ever." He nodded, but his eyes told me he wasn't convinced. That night, after I tucked him into bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The reservation confirmation glowed on the screen. Dates, names, payment details. My name was the one on the booking. My card was the one charged. I hovered over the cancel button. A week ago, I would have hesitated. I would have worried about arguments, guilt, disappointment. But all I could see now was Noah's face at that cafe table, shrinking into himself while the people who were supposed to love him looked away. I clicked cancel. The confirmation email arrived seconds later. I didn't cry. I just closed my laptop and whispered into the quiet kitchen, "I choose you." The backlash didn't come immediately. For the first few hours after I canceled the trip, my phone stayed quiet. No buzzing. No calls. No dramatic messages. I almost believed, naively, that maybe they were reflecting. Maybe someone had finally realized how cruel that brunch conversation had been. That illusion lasted exactly until 7:14 the next morning. The first text came from my mother. "Why did you cancel the reservation without talking to us first?" No greeting. No concern. Just irritation dressed up as confusion. I stared at the screen while Noah ate his cereal across the table, swinging his legs and humming under his breath. I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, another message appeared, this time from my father. "Your sister was joking. You took it too far." Joking. I wondered when excluding a child became comedy. My phone buzzed again. "Melissa." "Wow. I didn't think you'd actually do it. You really love creating drama, don't you?" I turned my phone face down and focused on Noah. He was lining up his spoon and bowl perfectly, the way he did when he was trying to feel in control. The morning sunlight caught in his hair, and for a moment, he looked peaceful. That peace mattered more than any explanation. I dropped him off at school and sat in my car for a long time afterward, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I felt hollow, like something old had finally cracked open. Melissa had always been like this. She spoke without filters and called it honesty. She hurt people and called it humor. And my parents, my well-meaning, conflict-avoiding parents, had spent a lifetime smoothing over the damage she left behind. "That's just how she is," they always said. But Noah was not required to suffer because my sister refused to grow up. By lunchtime, the messages had turned sharper. "You embarrassed us. The family was counting on this trip. You can't isolate your child forever." That one came from Melissa. I laughed out loud when I read it. A short, humorless sound that startled the woman sitting across from me in the cafe where I'd stopped for coffee. Isolate my child? I thought. From whom? People who made him feel like a burden? I typed out a response. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Instead, I blocked Melissa's number. Not with anger. Not with ceremony. Just with certainty. That evening, she showed up at my apartment. I knew it was her before I even opened the door. She knocked the way she always did, hard and impatient, like the world owed her immediate access. Noah was on the living room floor, building a careful tower of blocks. I put a finger to my lips and stepped outside, closing the door quietly behind me. Melissa stood there in sunglasses and heels, arms crossed. "Seriously," she said, "blocking me now. What do you want?" I asked. She scoffed. "I want you to stop acting like I attacked your kid." I made a comment. "You blew it up." "You told me my son didn't belong on a family vacation," I replied. "That's not a comment. That's a statement." She rolled her eyes. "You're too sensitive, and you're making him sensitive too." Something shifted then, not snapped, not exploded. Just shifted. "I'm done having this conversation," I said. "You need to leave." She laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "You don't get to cut me out because you didn't like a joke." "I absolutely do," I said calmly. "Especially when it involves my child." She leaned closer. "You think you're protecting him. You're just making him weak." That was the moment I stopped seeing her as my sister and started seeing her as a threat. "Get off my property," I said. She stared at me, shocked, then scoffed again and walked away, muttering under her breath about how impossible I was. That night, my parents called. I didn't answer. I lay beside Noah as he fell asleep, listening to his breathing even out, watching his chest rise and fall. He clutched a stuffed dinosaur the way he always did when something unsettled him. "Mom," he whispered, eyes still closed. "Yes." "Are we still going to the beach?" I swallowed. "Not with them," I said softly. "But we'll go somewhere. I promise." He nodded, already drifting back to sleep. After he did, I sat alone in the dark and let myself feel it all, the guilt they trained into me, the doubt, the old fear of being labeled difficult. Then I pictured that brunch table again. Melissa smiling. My parents silent. Noah shrinking. And for the first time, I didn't question my decision. I chose my child, and I wasn't done choosing him yet. The silence didn't last. With Melissa, it never did. For 2 full days after she showed up at my apartment, my phone stayed quiet. No messages. No missed calls. No surprise appearances. I almost let myself believe she backed off. That maybe, just maybe, she'd finally understood that I wasn't bluffing. But silence had always been Melissa's favorite weapon. It gave her time to build momentum. On the third morning, my mother called while I was tying Noah's shoes. "Claire," she said, skipping hello, "this has gone far enough." I paused, Noah's sneaker half-laced in my hands. "What has?" "This tension," she replied. "Your sister is really upset. She feels like you're punishing her." I finished tying the knot and looked up at Noah. He was watching my face closely, reading my expression the way children do when they sense a storm coming. "I'm not punishing anyone," I said evenly. "I'm protecting my son." There was a sigh on the other end. A long one. The kind meant to communicate disappointment without saying it out loud. "You can't keep him wrapped in cotton forever," my mother said. "The world won't be kind." "I know," I replied. "That's why home has to be." She didn't respond to that. At school drop-off, Noah hesitated before getting out of the car. He unbuckled his seatbelt slowly, then paused. "Is Aunt Melissa mad at me?" he asked. My chest tightened. "Why would you think that?" He shrugged. "She doesn't like me." I wanted to deny it. I wanted to soften it, but lying would have taught him the wrong lesson. "She made a bad choice," I said carefully, "and it's not your job to fix it." He nodded, though I could tell he didn't fully understand. Before closing the door, he leaned back in and hugged me tightly. That hug stayed with me all day. Melissa chose the most public place possible for her next move. I was in the school pickup line that afternoon when I saw her. She stood near the entrance, arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her head like a challenge. At first, I thought I was mistaken. Then she waved. I felt my stomach drop. I pulled forward slowly, hoping she'd move aside. She didn't. She stepped closer to the curb, clearly waiting for me. I parked. The moment I opened my door, she started talking. "You can't just erase me," she said loudly, loud enough for other parents to glance over. "You're tearing this family apart over one sentence." I kept my voice low. "This isn't the time." "You made it public when you canceled the trip," she snapped. "Everyone knows now." That was when Noah came out. He spotted her immediately. His steps slowed, his shoulders curled inward, the way they always did when he felt overwhelmed. He looked at me, then down at the pavement, his hand tightening around the strap of his backpack. I didn't look at Melissa again. I walked straight to Noah, crouched in front of him, and smiled. "Hey, buddy," I said. "Ready to go?" He nodded and reached for my hand. Melissa followed us, still talking. "See? This is what I mean. He can't handle anything." I stopped. Slowly, deliberately, I turned to face her. "You don't get to talk about my child," I said. "Not here. Not anywhere." She scoffed. "You're acting like I attacked him." "You did," I replied. "You told him he didn't belong." Parents nearby had gone quiet. I could feel eyes on us. Melissa's face flushed. I was joking. "No," I said. "You were excluding. And I won't allow that." She laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "So what? You're cutting me off forever." I thought about it. About the brunch table. The canceled trip. The blocked number. Noah's question in the car. "You're not being erased," I said calmly. "You're just not included anymore." Her smile vanished. I buckled Noah into his seat, closed the door, and got into the car. As I drove away, my hands were steady. My heart was loud, but it wasn't afraid. That night, the messages started again. From my dad, "Your mother is beside herself." From my aunt, "Families forgive. That's what we do." From an unknown number I recognized immediately as Melissa's, "You'll regret this." I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I sat on the floor with Noah and helped him build a puzzle. Piece by piece, we filled in the picture. Slow, careful work that required patience. Later, after he fell asleep, I stood in the doorway and watched him for a long time. His brow was smooth. His hands rested open at his sides. For the first time in days, he looked peaceful. That was when I understood something with startling clarity. This wasn't about a vacation. It never had been. It was about who I allowed close enough to shape my child's sense of belonging. And that was a decision I was no longer willing to outsource to anyone else. After the scene at the school, something changed. Not around me, but around Melissa. For the first time, she wasn't being indulged quietly. Parents had seen it. Teachers had seen it. People outside our family bubble had witnessed her entitlement in real time, and that rattled her more than any argument ever could. She stopped pretending this was about a misunderstanding. Now it was about control. She started showing up where she knew I'd feel cornered. Once at the grocery store, she stood at the end of the aisle and watched me like she was waiting for permission to approach. Another time, she parked across the street from my building and sat in her car for nearly an hour. She never waved, never got out, just watched. I didn't engage. That restraint seemed to enrage her. One evening, as I was helping Noah with homework, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. "You really think you can do this without me?" I stared at the message, my stomach tightening. I didn't need to ask who it was. I set my phone down and finished helping Noah spell his words. When he went to brush his teeth, I picked the phone back up. "Without you." I typed, "I already am." I blocked the number immediately after sending it. What Melissa didn't know, what no one in my family knew, was that my life had already been shifting quietly long before that brunch ever happened. For nearly a year, I'd been building something of my own. Not loudly, not for validation, just carefully. Late nights after Noah fell asleep, I'd sit at the kitchen table with my laptop, teaching myself skills I was never encouraged to learn. Budgeting, planning, risk. I read until my eyes burned. I revised ideas I didn't even tell anyone about because I'd been trained, over time, to keep my ambitions small. Melissa had always taken up space easily. I had learned to survive in the margins. 3 weeks before the canceled vacation, my paperwork had gone through. The business was official. My name was the only one on it. No partners. No family involvement. Just mine. I hadn't told anyone. Not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't want it touched. Melissa had overheard a fragment once, months ago. She'd laughed, like she always did. "That should be a family thing," she'd said. "We can do it together." I never answered. Now, suddenly, she remembered. She showed up at my apartment again, this time without sunglasses, without a smile. Her car was parked crooked, engine still running. "I know what you're doing," she said the moment I stepped outside. I closed the door behind me. "You don't," I replied. "You think you can freeze me out and still succeed," she snapped. "You need me. You always have." That old reflex tugged at me, the instinct to explain, to defend, to make her understand. I ignored it. "You need to leave," I said. Her voice dropped. "You don't get to decide who's family." I met her gaze. "I decide who has access to my child." That was the line she couldn't cross. Her anger cracked open into something uglier, panic. The messages that followed were relentless. Voicemails late at night. Emails from accounts I didn't recognize. Long, spiraling accusations about how I was selfish, ungrateful, impossible. Then she brought my parents into it. My mother called the next morning, her voice unsteady. "She says you're pushing her out on purpose." "I am," I said gently. There was a pause. A real one this time. "She says she's afraid of losing everything," my mother added. I thought of Noah, standing outside the school, shrinking into himself. "Then she should have thought about that," I replied. That night, something finally shifted on my parents' end. Melissa showed up at their house unannounced. She yelled. She cried. She accused them of choosing me over her. When that didn't work, she laughed and dismissed it all as exaggeration until Noah's name came up. According to my mother, Melissa waved her hand and said, "He's just different. Everyone knows that." And for the first time, my parents didn't smooth it over. They didn't explain her away. They told her to leave. When my mother told me this over the phone, her voice was shaking. "We should have stopped this years ago," she said quietly. I didn't say I know. I let the silence do the work. That night, Noah slept through without waking once. No bad dreams. No restless pacing. Just steady, peaceful breathing. I sat on the couch long after he fell asleep, realizing something that felt almost unreal. Melissa was losing her grip, not because I fought her, but because I stopped feeding her. And in that quiet withdrawal, I found a strength I didn't know I had. The night after the confrontation, I stayed in the guest room alone with Jonah. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Jonah, exhausted but restless, kept twisting in the sheets. I held a small hand in mine, feeling the weight of the day settle in my chest. I couldn't shake the image of my sister smirking when she told me Jonah wasn't invited. I whispered softly to him, "It's okay, sweetie. Mommy's here. Always." His small fingers tightened around mine, and I realized that this little gesture, so simple, so human, was more meaningful than anything my family had ever offered. I thought about my parents. I thought about how they had just sat there, nodding politely, saying nothing. It hurt more than my sister's outright cruelty. Silence can be more cutting than words. I looked out the window, the city lights twinkling faintly, and I made a decision. I would not beg for inclusion in their trip. I would not compromise Jonah's happiness to satisfy family expectations. This trip, this exclusion, was the catalyst I needed. It made me see clearly that my child's well-being was more important than any family gathering or forced smiles around a dinner table. The next morning, I packed lightly. No excitement, no hope of reconciliation, just essentials for Jonah and me. I could feel the tension behind me as I walked past my sister, who gave me a smug, "Don't let the door hit you on the way out." I ignored it. Every word she spoke, every glance she threw, only reinforced my resolve. We drove away from the house, and Jonah, sensing the shift in energy, rested his head on my shoulder. "Mommy, are we going somewhere fun?" he asked, his voice tentative. I smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "Yes, sweetie. Somewhere we can laugh, play, and just be us." As we left, I realized I had never felt so free. Free from the judgment, the unspoken rules, and the quiet manipulation that had been part of my life for as long as I could remember. Choosing my child over the family meant embracing my own voice, my own choices. That evening, I found a small cabin by the lake, modest but perfect for us. Jonah's eyes lit up as he saw the water shimmering in the sunset. We unpacked our things, and I watched him run barefoot along the grass, his laughter ringing in the air. For the first time in years, I felt my shoulders relax. I didn't need validation from my sister or my parents. Jonah's joy was my only compass now. As we sat by the fire later, roasting marshmallows, Jonah leaned against me. "Mommy, I love it here," he said. And in that moment, I understood that love was not about pleasing others. It was about protecting, nurturing, and giving your child the world you always promised them. I reflected on the family dynamics that had pushed me here. My sister's entitlement, my parents' passive silence, the way I had ignored red flags in the name of family unity, it all became clear. I didn't have to carry the burden of their expectations anymore. I could create my own space, one where Jonah felt included, valued, and safe. That night, I wrote a message to my mother. I didn't rant, I didn't accuse. I simply explained my choice, my reasoning, and my commitment to Jonah. I closed it with a heartfelt line. "I love my family, but I love my son more. I hope one day you can understand that." Sending it felt like exhaling a lifetime of tension. I didn't know how she would respond, but for the first time, I didn't wait for approval. I waited for peace. The next few days at the lake cabin felt like stepping into a different world. Jonah explored every corner with unbridled excitement, chasing dragonflies and dipping his toes into the cool water. I watched him and felt a calm I hadn't experienced in years. No judgment, no tension, just laughter, freedom, and the quiet bond between mother and child. I kept thinking about my family back home. My sister, with her smirk and entitlement, my parents, quiet and hesitant. I realized that choosing Jonah didn't mean cutting them off entirely. It meant choosing him first, above all else. It meant drawing a line that could never be crossed again. My boundaries were firm, and for the first time, I felt they were unshakable. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I sat on the porch with a notebook, writing down my thoughts. I wrote about the pain, the disappointment, but also about the clarity I had gained. Choosing my child over family was not an act of rebellion, it was an act of love. The truth was simple: love does not come with conditions, and it does not tolerate exclusion. Jonah climbed onto my lap, holding a half-roasted marshmallow. "Mommy, do you think they miss me?" he asked, a hint of worry in his voice. I hugged him tightly, brushing his hair from his forehead. "Sweetheart, I don't know. But what I do know is that I will always be here for you, and that's what matters. You are never alone, not as long as I'm with you." That night, I received a message from my mother. It was short, hesitant, but it carried weight. "I see now. I'm sorry for staying silent. I can't promise everything will be perfect, but I hope we can start fresh." I didn't respond immediately. I wanted to sit with my feelings, to acknowledge that healing was a process, not an instant fix. Jonah was asleep beside me, and I held a small hand, feeling gratitude for the lessons he had taught me without even knowing it. The rest of the week passed in a comforting rhythm. We went fishing, built sandcastles, and cooked simple meals together. Jonah's laughter was a soundtrack to my renewed sense of purpose. Every night, I tucked him in, whispering that he was loved, safe, and irreplaceable. And every night, I felt a quiet pride in myself, pride for standing firm, for honoring my child, for embracing my own strength. When it was finally time to return home, I felt no dread. I knew the family trip would come again eventually, but the power dynamics had shifted. I would no longer allow exclusion, manipulation, or silent judgment to dictate our lives. Jonah was my priority, and that priority came with confidence, clarity, and love. Back in the city, I arranged a simple day for just Jonah and me. We visited a park he loved and shared ice cream, making memories that weren't overshadowed by family drama. Later, I finally replied to my mother's message, choosing my words carefully. "Thank you for understanding. I love you, and I hope we can build something better. But please remember, Jonah comes first. Always." Sending it felt like reclaiming my voice, my agency, my life. In the weeks that followed, subtle changes began to emerge. My parents reached out occasionally, my sister's tone softened slightly, but the most important change was in me. I no longer felt torn, conflicted, or anxious about family approval. I had learned to prioritize love over tradition, presence over pretense, and my child's happiness over societal expectations. One evening, Jonah hugged me tightly and whispered, "Mommy, I'm glad it's just us." I kissed his forehead and whispered back, "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." And in that moment, I understood that choosing my child didn't mean abandoning my family entirely. It meant reclaiming my power, my peace, and my purpose. We had no grand reconciliation, no dramatic confrontations beyond that. But we had something more lasting, a bond unbreakable by exclusion, a mother's unwavering love, and a life guided by clarity and self-respect. And as I tucked Jonah into bed that night, listening to his soft breathing, I smiled. The trip, the confrontation, the pain, it had all led me here. To peace, to growth, to a mother and child finally free to exist on their own terms, unafraid of the shadows of judgment or cruelty. For the first time in my life, I felt complete. Not because my family finally acknowledged me, but because I had acknowledged myself. And that was all the validation I, or Jonah, would ever need.